Voltaire once wrote, "To learn who rules over you, simply find out who you're not allowed to criticize." See, censorship reflects a society or company's lack of confidence in itself. You guys enjoy the video. How ironic is it that as they virtue signal and claim to be champions for tolerance and diversity, Google shows themselves to be one of the most intolerant, non-diversified companies on the planet. And to add one more level of irony to the entire ridiculously intolerant scenario, they fired a guy for attempting to be diverse while calling his memo anti-diverse, which, if you've read the entire thing with an objective eye, it's not. A company that brags about hiring a boatload of homosexuals and trannies when they could have hired far fewer, more qualified and efficient employees, which would not only save but make them more money, is some seriously insane shenanigans that Google's shareholders should take a strong look at. Let's put the shoe on the other foot for a second. If I owned a company and found that a tranny could perform a task better and more efficiently than two white males, saving me money and the headache of worrying about the liability of a lazy employee who gave my company a bad name, who the heck do you think I'd hire? Who would you hire? Google is this massive worldwide corporation that should be focusing on being the best it can possibly be. Instead, they choose to worry about cultural diversity and political correctness in lieu of the sane move of picking the most qualified people for the job. It's almost like they're trying to sabotage themselves. But then again, such a move shows their arrogance as they continue to monopolize the global marketplace. In their response to this now infamous internal memo, Google has demonstrated that not only can they not see their blind spots, they're unwilling to recognize them when they're sitting on their desks and written in black and white. Google's firing of software engineer James Damore for daring to express politically incorrect ideas in an internal memo is the latest example of the political left's tyrannical propensity to suppress speech, thought, and dissent. Almost as troubling as the policing of the left is its apparent obliviousness toward its own hypocrisy and the danger it poses to the liberal exchange of ideas. While constitutional issues may not be involved in the Google case because no state action is involved, moral shaming has become a chilling sledgehammer in the hands of leftist-dominated institutions. In his memo, Damore notes that Google's political bias silences dissenting opinions supposedly to shield employees from offensive ideas and protect their psychological safety. Damore writes, quote, "But shaming into silence is the antithesis of psychological safety. This silencing has created an ideological echo chamber where some ideas are too sacred to be honestly discussed." Damore concedes that all people have biases, but that open and honest discussion can highlight these biases and help us grow. He says he wrote the memo to encourage such discussion about Google's biases, a discussion that's being silenced by, in his words, the dominant ideology. Damore opines that both the political left and right have moral biases. He says, quote, "Only facts and reason can shed light on these biases. But when it comes to diversity and inclusion, Google's left bias has created a politically correct monoculture that maintains its hold by shaming dissenters into silence. This silence removes any checks against encroaching extremist and authoritarian policies." He then details how this bias affects Google's explanation for the gender gap in the tech world and leadership positions. Its leftist bias tells it that the gap is due to differential treatment or discrimination and injustices. It then applies authoritarian measures that actually discriminate against men to achieve equal representation. Damore says this is the wrong approach because the gender gap is partially attributable to many biological differences between men and women, and because there are, quote, non-discriminatory ways to reduce the gender gap. Stated more simply, biologically based differences between the sexes in certain abilities and preferences, as opposed to gender bias and discrimination, or why there are fewer women in tech jobs and leadership positions. Redistributing these positions could be more harmful than helpful to employees in the company. We should think of people as individuals, not as interchangeable members of groups. It's ironic that such leftist thinking purports to enhance the worth of women or other members of allegedly victimized groups, but instead disrespects and devalues their human dignity by imposing group-wide remedies without regard to individual qualities and behavior. We gotta recognize that Damore is making two separate but interrelated complaints. He's saying that Google is applying totalitarian groupthink to its gender bias problem and thus misanalyzing it, and that this same groupthink also prevents open and honest discussion of the problem by forbidding the expression of dissenting views. It's one thing for Google honchos to strongly disagree with the thrust of Damore's substantial and weighty arguments concerning the reasons for the gender gap, but it's quite another for them to effectively ban dissent and summarily fire him for dissenting. But this is nothing new for the left. For example, many leftists seek to ban debate on climate change through cultural fiat, declaring that irrefutable scientific consensus has been established. In the name of science, which by definition demands that such issues always remain open to challenge, they shut down dissent. In the same way, they say certain views will not be tolerated on college campuses because they are too offensive for certain people. On many of these same campuses, they commit violence to people and property to protest conservative speakers whose speech they think could lead to violence. Such preposterous thinking is as widespread as it is ludicrous. Through sophistry and semantic wizardry, the left has ushered in an era of intellectual chaos. Leftists see themselves as stewards of enlightened thinking, of liberal academic inquiry, tolerance, and diversity. But once again, they prove themselves to be Stalinist tailors of intellectual straitjackets who flagrantly violate the very spirit of free expression on which America was founded. Leftists are ingenious manufacturers of twisted excuses to justify their indefensible actions. But in these cases, intellectual honesty screams for an honest accounting. They might be fooling themselves into believing they're advancing the greater good, but they're not fooling those outside the intellectual prisons of their pride-spawned, self-congratulatory oppression. Guys, based on today's trend, the days for channels like this one on YouTube are numbered. Should my channel be taken down and you want to stay in contact with me and keep receiving my content, check out all my backup links in the description. I'll also pin those links to the top in the comments section. Virtually 100% of my Google revenue is evaporated. I rely on your support to keep it going. Today's shirts for the day are Truth, the new hate speech, Truth is treason in the empire of lies, and McDeath's, eat fast, die young. Your $5 off promo code is in a link in the description for you for every single shirt in the store. Don't forget to leave your thoughts for the world and the Google Thought Police in the comments section below. I'll see you guys in the next video.